Welcome to Stars Podcast, your growth mindset mecca. We are all about self-leadership principles here at Stars Podcast. Our guests come from all over the world with very unique stories of how they hack their way into success. As you'll quickly find out, nothing happens overnight. And as always, enjoy the journey. Yay. Wanted to let you know this episode is brought to you by Fuzzy Monkey Coffee. You may think you're drinking good coffee, but are you really? Fuzzy Monkey Coffee Company challenged you to buy a bag of our specialty fresh roasted coffee with an exclusive Stars Podcast discount. Visit www.fuzzymonkeycoffee.com and enter STARS POD15 at checkout to get 15% off any bag or coffee single-serve pods. My special preference is Squirrel Monkey. Also check out their NFT project, fuzzymonkey.com/NFT. Also give us a look over on TikTok at Stars Podcast with the Running with Ron episodes, talking about mindset, running hacks, and all-around storytelling to commemorate and document the journey to a 100-mile run in under 24 hours, which is happening September 9th and 10th at the Pine Creek Challenge. Enjoy the show. Hey guys, welcome back. This is Ron Jordan, your host over at Stars Podcast, coming out of Rocinante Studios in Slippery Rock, Pennsylvania. Today we have a special guest coming on the show, my brother, Garrett Brill. I finally got to meet IRL down in Miami, and I'm so excited for you guys all to meet him as well. You can find him on Instagram, 𝘊𝘰𝘯𝘯𝘵𝘪𝘰𝘯𝘯. He is all about connection with intention. You want to know something like, whenever I got around Garrett in real life, like I've watched him on Instagram and I've seen his stuff and I've really been motivated by his spoken word and his performances. But when you get to be around him in real life, it's just like so intoxicating. You don't want to leave him. So I hope that's the same whenever we're talking here. Garrett, welcome to the show, my man.
Thank you for having me. And I feel the same way about you, brother. I always think that we're just reflections, and whatever love you're willing to give out, it'll come back. And so I felt that from you and Alyssa as well.
Yeah, I'll tell you what, down in Miami, that was a lot of fun. Like I said, and I've said this from like the very beginning of my whole entire journey, like my journey online, we'll say, like just from way back in the day, I'm talking AOL chat days, I was able to like create these cool relationships online. You know, I've always had that in my blood. So whenever we go into social media and we start to follow certain people and we get those people in our feeds and like we're constantly watching them, you feel connected in some sort of way. And then once you get it in real life too, it's like, oh my gosh, it's totally different. I'm curious, like what you think about that in terms of like online connection, because your whole entire aura is about human connection. Like that's in your Instagram is human connection facilitator. So I'm curious, like your thoughts on the ability to connect online, and how that translates to IRL, or which is, I don't want to say which is better, but which do you, let's just put it there.
Yeah, I would say no matter what, I'm always IRL. That's what I care about most. I love to give someone a hug. I love to look in their eyes. And I think that there's nothing that beats that. And I know from the pandemic that this, like, let's take one level back, like, let's go to like Zoom. I know that you can create deep, meaningful connections over Zoom 100%. I used to, when the pandemic hit, I just knew I needed to connect people. So I started a journaling call every single Tuesday. It's been going now for like 2 years in a month or so. And we just have really deep, thoughtful conversations, come with a prompt. Everyone writes for 15 minutes and then we all like talk about it. And it was just a really helpful way to connect. And I had people on there that I've never met in person, and I would consider them really close friends. So that's one step, you know. And then you go on like IG and Instagram, and like, you know, you can go on like Clubhouse and things like that. And I would say that you can have deep connections there as well. I think it just, you can feel when people are being authentic and genuine. And when that is happening, those connections are happening. And sometimes you can be wrong. You know, sometimes you meet someone, you're like, oh man, they were as, you know, as deep and thoughtful as I thought that they were. But I would say for the most part, when you know, you know.
Yeah. My question too is always, and this is why I find Clubhouse so curious, is you've stripped away everything. You strip away the ability to see nonverbal communication. You've stripped away most of the time the actual image, especially in our world, in the Web3 world. Like, we're all about cartoony and just like not even a real person there. And maybe it's not even the real person whenever it is their picture. But that aside, um, like we'll talk about catfish maybe another time. But like, when you could strip everything down to just a voice, that's why I think like even podcasts are interesting and radio shows have always been interesting, is you just have a voice and you can really tell a lot of intention on the inflection of the voice and those types of things. I'm curious, like in your work of study or even just your background, what are some of the things that you listen for, like in a voice to really make that decision?
That's a really good question. Well, I want to first just acknowledge that like 80 to 90% of communication is nonverbal.
Right.
And so that is something when you ask that question, my first thought is when I'm in a space with people, I'm always paying attention, not like consciously, but subconsciously paying attention to the nonverbals of someone. And I think that when you are listening to people, I just feel like you can feel their intent and their love from how they are speaking. I always think back to when I go to an event and I'm listening to someone and I'm learning from them. One thing that I pay attention to is, are they coming from a place of that they absolutely know, like this is a fact? And when they're sharing facts, and I'm always a little hesitant because for me, I think about we're on a rock blasting through space at like, I don't even know how many miles per hour. And the closest galaxy is 2.4 million light years away. And so when someone comes and acts like they have these absolute truths that they're dropping, that's where I find resistance, because I like people that say, hey, this is my experience and I'm welcoming you to take whatever you want. I mean, they're not saying this, but they're almost saying this without saying this. And for me, that is what I pay attention to. And I think, obviously there's also these inflections and these things like that people share when they're speaking, and you can kind of tell, have they lived it or are they just kind of regurgitating? But that's not perfect science either. Sometimes, even on Clubhouse, same thing. You can meet someone in person and you're like, oh, but for the most part, I feel like if there's a resonance and you can trust that resonance.
Yeah, I totally agree with you. And you can always tell. So I come from a sales background. Like I'm a sales guy. So whenever I get in front of a customer, it's, do I know what I'm talking about? Because I need to have conviction over what I'm actually selling, the solution that we're selling. Because if I don't believe in it, how are they going to believe in it? So like, if I'm at 100%, maybe they get to like 40%, and that's good. But if I'm at 40%, they're not even going to listen, So I totally understand that. And you know what? Like, you bring up a good point too. Whenever you talk about us just hurling through the wind, into an expanding nothingness that we don't understand whatsoever, and you got somebody on stage telling you this is how you live, yeah, that rubs me the wrong way a little bit.
And I think there's a balance. So you can be convicted and speak in this way. And I think that's kind of how my poetry comes through, because I'm just sharing what I needed at a certain time in my life. And so I can be convicted about it, but I'm not convicted about changing how you feel about it. I'm just sharing my experience. And if it resonates with you, awesome. And I think there is a balance of conviction and, and just sharing your truth. And I think also, when it comes to sales and things like that, because I used to be in sales as well. And, is the person listening, are they genuinely wanting to know what I need? Because I'm the kind of person that would say, hey, after hearing everything you shared, I actually think that we might not be the best people for you. And people remember that and respect that. And then maybe 5 years down the road, they need exactly what you were selling. And they're like, I'm going to call that guy that told me that I wasn't the right people for him.
Yes.
the right people. And so I think that whereas where there's like some kind of balance.
Yeah, I actually say that in my emails all the time. Like if I'm meeting somebody new, I'm like, maybe we can work together, maybe we can. I'm not like wishy-washy like that, but I say it in a different way. But that's more or less what I'm saying is like, here's what I'd like to introduce myself. Here's what we have going on. I'd love to see if we can work together. Maybe we just have some lunch, and if that's cool, then awesome. Yeah. But let me dovetail back into sort of, I want to understand where the spoken word comes from and why spoken word to deliver your message when there's so many other ways. Where does that come from?
Oh my goodness. That's a long journey, but I'm happy to
We can
share.
go as far back as you want to.
Yeah. So, oh my goodness. So when I share my whole poetry experience, it starts with a story where I can essentially share it. But, it's first grade. I'm 6 years old. And when we were in kindergarten, we would watch as, kids would walk up to the big kids playground, and we would watch for a whole year while the whole school gets to go play with the big kids. And in first grade, I got to do that. So my whole class, we march up the lawn, and we finally get to play up there with the big kids. And when we go there, the teacher drops us off with a play leader, which is essentially the oldest, coolest kid in school that gets to make sure that we're organized and having fun. And I'm sitting there. We're all lined up, excited to play. And the play leader looks at me in the face in front of the whole class and says, "What's wrong with your lip?" And I was born with a cleft palate and a cleft lip, which essentially means I didn't have a roof of my mouth, and I had an opening in my face. And so I have a scar down my face where I got sewed up within days of being born. And so at that point in my life, I knew I never wanted to be, I needed to protect myself. I needed to figure out how can I put on a piece of armor so that doesn't happen to me again. And so throughout my life, I was looking for ways to protect myself. And really the first thing that it came to is sports. And I just got really good at sports. And I always wanted to be the best at everything that I did, but it was all a protection mechanism. Okay. And I might have gone too far back in this whole story, but for the longest time, I would stay in the shadows. And I did whatever I needed to protect myself. Honestly, sometimes I stayed in the background in the shadows so that no one could see me. And if that's what served me. And sometimes I was loud and charismatic. In high school, I was the class clown. And that was because I was at a school that I kind of needed to have a little swagger, or else I might have gotten beat up or something like that. I grew up in LAUSD. And so my school was where all the bad kids got sent. My school was like 3,500 people, and my graduating class was less than 400, which shows how many people didn't make it all the way through.
Right.
And so like that charisma was what protected me in that time. So I kind of got all these different things that I gathered, and it worked all the way up until I was in corporate America, and I was wanting to be the best employee for my mentor. And I did everything that I could to prove that I was the best employee. And in that process, I started to realize that for pretty much my whole life, I wasn't living the life I wanted to live. I was just doing everything that society and people had told me to keep me protected and make sure that people didn't see that I was the kid with the scar on my lip. I didn't know all of this at this time, but when I look back, that's what happened, right? And so one day I started to just kind of dive deeper into myself. I started meditating, journaling. I read a book that basically said, let go of everything that isn't serving you. And so I stopped drinking. I stopped playing fantasy football. I got rid of my DirecTV. I started reading. I started meditating, and in that process, I started to hear this little whisper that was like, you need to leave all of this. And it wasn't easy to leave. We were the sixth fastest growing company in Arizona. I had built a company culture with the owners that was the top 10 best places to work in Arizona for 4 straight years. And we were killing it. And every checkbox that society had given me, I was checking. So it wasn't easy to leave, but this little whisper told me that it was time to leave. And so I left and went traveling for essentially, I didn't live in this house that I'm in right now for 4 years. I was vagabonding and moving around. And in that process, there was a day that I found myself on the Sinai Peninsula in Egypt by myself in a hammock. There probably wasn't tourists within 2 miles of me. I was literally in this shack in a hammock overlooking this beautiful water. Saudi Arabia was across from me. Jordan were the hills behind, and Israel was over to the left. And I'm sitting here in this hammock just thinking, how the hell did I end up in this hammock in Egypt by myself? And I thought about it, and it was like 3 years after I had left. And I was contemplating my steps and contemplating these years. And in that process, I just started to think about, what does flow mean to me? And that same whisper that I gotten really close with, that I try to follow as much as possible. And this is the whisper. I mean, it could be a feeling. It doesn't have to be a whisper. For me, it feels like this like confident whisper that was with me my whole life. And it's the same one that said, hey, there's more to life than this. And when I was sitting there, it just said, why don't you write a poem about it? And so as I'm sitting in like the 95-degree heat, having nothing else to do, I write this poem about flow. And ever since, it's just been my way of, like, in a moment where my higher self is essentially telling me what I need to know and understand deeply. And so sometimes when people hear my poetry, it sounds like I'm speaking to them, but it's really what I needed for myself at a certain time. And so for me, it's my way to understand the world and my medicine that I needed at a certain time. And so I know it's a long way to explain, but essentially that's how it all happened.
Yeah, no, and it actually makes a lot of sense, and it's a similar story that we hear whenever you and I'm going to go back to with you, is like that protection mechanism. And I'm sure that you didn't consciously know that that was a protection mechanism at the time, but as you reflect on it and as you kind of take, and this is why I think that it's important, and I talked about this on one of my posts, I think it was like last week, is like the ability to play in quiet are the times where you can self-reflect and start to understand why you're behaving certain ways. And you can nail down, like, am I putting up walls? Am I tearing down walls? Am I facilitating things that benefit me and those around me? Like you start to kind of go over your goals and all of those things. And I think, like, whenever people say Sundays are a day of rest, like I really believe that, you know, regardless of your religion, I think a whole day to really reflect is great. It's like, it's such a good thing to do, is just to reflect. And if you were in a situation where you're constantly trying to be the best at everything, you're not reflecting. You're just kind of, you're parroting, you're looking at things that are successful. And you're like, okay, I need to do those things because that's what I'm supposed to do. Like that's what we do as we grow up. And it seems like as we get into almost, I don't know, some people, maybe it's a little bit earlier, but I noticed that a lot of us guys, it's like our late 20s, early 30s. And I know this just because that's where I'm at right now, is like, we start to like, and I feel like it's like my daughter right now, where she's coming into a teenager and like she knows things and she goes against what I say. And it's very similar to us in society, is like, I know things now. And I don't necessarily agree with all of those things. And then we start to kind of, I don't want to say buck the system, but that's really what it is. And we start to try and find those inner flow pieces in our head, and in that inner voice. And as we get quieter, it can get louder. And it's really interesting. And Joe Rogan says this one time, he's like, where do thoughts come from? Like, where are those from? And you start to like think about it, and you're like, where do those come from? Like, why is that thought coming into my head? And this poetry that now you can think about and then write it down and then talk about is one of those things that is unique in a way that, through the medium that you're doing it, and people listening to it, and it's resonating with them, and it's a thing that, like, it worked for you. And we're not all different. Like we're really, like, we all deal with the same emotions. So if it worked for you in a time of need and you're displaying that out there and you're pushing that out there, it's like it's going to help somebody because somebody is going through that as well. And regardless of the timing of it, or regardless of like how you're doing it, I think it's really important for everybody who's listening. If that's something that, you know, something has helped you, I urge you, like, write it down, speak it, because that's what's going to help us all in the long run, because all of our emotions are so similar.
Absolutely, 100%. And I that's something that I realized through the process is, you know, one of my mentors told me that there's only two things that happen in life. You, or when anything that you do, anything that you say, whatever comes out is either an act in love or a cry for help. Right. So everything that I do is either this or that. It's either an act of love, I'm doing it out of love, or I'm doing it out of a cry for help because I'm having pain. And it makes me think when you were talking about, you know, when I would play sports, right? How this protected me was I just like when I was like 10, I was just really good at every sport. Like, and what would happen is someone would make fun of my lip and and then I'd go play basketball and then there'd still be chirping going on. And then I would not just beat them, but I would just like verbally attack and assault them so they never did it again. And it was like I wasn't necessarily saying anything mean, but I was verbally and physically destroying them. But when I look back, it was like, yeah, but was that an act in love or a cry for help? Because if I truly believed about myself, then I didn't need to do that. And so that was a cry for help when I would do that. You know, I mean, even in college, like beer pong, whatever it was, those were all cries for help because if I truly believed and had my own inner peace, then I wouldn't have to do that. And, you know, also when you're talking about these stories, like that's what I also realized is as I started to quiet my mind and I could really hear two distinct voices. There's this voice that's like, you can't do that, or you're not good enough, or whatever that voice is. And it might not even be a voice. It could just be a feeling. And the more that I slowed down, I could realize this voice that was with me forever. It would be like this whisper that was like, you can do this, or you need to try playing the guitar. Whatever the voice is, I just invite people to follow it as deeply and as often as you can. I always say you never know if you feel like you're supposed to pick up a guitar and you haven't, like, who knows what that's going to do? Maybe you go pick up a guitar and get guitar lessons and your guitar teacher is the love of your life. Or maybe they're like, hey, I'm going to go to a salsa class. And you're like, oh, I'm going to do salsa. And then salsa is your thing. You don't know what it is. It's just following that whisper and trusting that whisper. And, you know, one of my favorite quotes is Albert Einstein, who I think we all could agree is probably one of the most practical, logical thinkers of all time. And he says that I'm going to just paraphrase it because I don't want to try to say I can quote it exactly, but he essentially says, the intuitive mind is a gift and the practical mind is the faithful servant. We have created a society that has forgotten the gift and honors the servant. And so when someone that's that practical is saying to follow that intuition, I listen to that and I try to listen to mine.
I'm writing that down. Yeah, I wrote down the follow the intuition and one of two things, act of love or cry for help. You know, we far too often think that one is the other, it seems, you know, and it's confusing. And I was listening to Alyssa and I were watching Brene Brown's special on Netflix. And what she said in the, I think it's like episode 2 was, we have to find the right language to describe what we're feeling and what we're doing. And that way, like, we can really understand it and put some action behind it. So whenever you're doing the spoken word and you're doing it in front of folks, what are some of the experiences that you've been through with your audience, or just like what is the feeling there from them?
You know what? It's really interesting because what I love the most about it is a lot of the reflections are that people come up and tell me, this reminded me of when I experienced this, or oh my gosh, when you shared this, I totally resonate, like it. And for me, that's my point. Like, I just want people to experience their own reflection. I don't go up there trying to say, hey, this is my poetry and I hope you think it's cool. That is like, I mean, maybe there's a blind spot and there's a part of me that really wants that, but I truly feel that I'm just there to reflect back whatever it is that you need in that moment. And one poem might resonate more with you than the other. And I personally feel like I'm just channeling. Like, if I'm on stage speaking, I'll get in my head more because I start thinking about how I say it. Because with my cleft palate, I went to speech therapy till I was in 5th grade, and I have all of these wounds from being the kid with the scar on my face. And so sometimes when I'm thinking about what I'm going to say, I get in my head. But when I'm sharing my poetry, I genuinely just feel like I'm just sharing what needs to come out, and
Right.
and it feels very right. And so when I hear those reflections, that's what makes me happy, knowing that people are seeing their own reflection and hopefully finding ways that they can take action on those on their whisper. And that's really the overlying thing. Like, when I share a whole hour, it's called the Journey of Self-Remembrance, and it's my own journey of self-remembrance. And in that process, hopefully there's little nuggets that people can take with them, if it resonates.
Absolutely. I always used to think, like, whenever I would go to church and things like that, and I always wondered, like, whenever the preacher was saying, like, God spoke to me or whatever, and I was always like, that's such BS. I'm like, that is not happening. That doesn't happen. And then all of a sudden, like, you start to reflect and you're like, oh, somebody, like, I have talking going on in my head. Like, that's happening. There are voices, not like I'm schizophrenic or anything, but you
Right.
know what I mean? Like, that person that's telling you that you can get on the treadmill and go 30 minutes, but then you also have the person in there that's telling you, no, you should just stay in bed. You need to relax. Like, those are real thoughts, and like, those are real voices in there that are combating each other all the time. And I think of, like, fencing, like like
Yeah.
these two people are fencing in my head. Then I think of the movie of oh, what's that movie with all the characters inside? Up? No, not Up.
Oh,
Oh,
Inside Out.
Inside Out.
I was like,
Yeah.
I'm not a movie guy. I'm not gonna be able to get it for you.
Yeah,
And
yeah.
that is a great movie. That's a good one.
It's amazing. You want to
Yeah.
talk about being able to, like, understand emotions for a kid. I mean, I understood my emotions way, like, watching that, I'm like, oh, this is beautiful. You want to be able to
Yes.
identify these things, and even with the colors and all of that, I love that movie, and I point to it all the time. But it's like, those voices are really happening, and whichever one that we want to listen to is our choice at that time. And I think that's where, for myself, is whichever one that I want to listen to. Like, you have to practice that. You have to be able to quiet everything else and be able to actually listen to them, and figure out the goals. And that's why I think journaling helps so much. And it could be, and journaling can come in so many different forms. And I don't want to get too far down the rabbit hole here on, like, modalities, but, like, it could come in so many different forms. You could write it down, you could speak it into your phone, you could do all types of things. But I think just the reflection and the practice of reflection is going to further your ability to, like, feed whichever wolf that you want to. You know what I mean?
Yes. Yes. And I love that analogy. One of my life mentors, Dr. Wayne Dyer, says that if praying is speaking to God, then your intuition is God speaking to you.
Mm.
And that definitely resonates with what you're sharing. And there's a couple of things that are coming up. So I'm trying to express all of the things that I want to reflect back. So one thing is Eckhart Tolle I read his book while I was traveling, and he talks about that there is, there's these two voices, but you are actually the awareness that's noticing them. You're not necessarily either. You are just the awareness that can notice that there's these voices coming in. And one thing I was going to say earlier is a lot of those voices are something at some point of time that said something about you that you decided to adopt. And so that's like the combat. Louise L. Hay says, write down all of the shoulds in your life. Like, I should do this, I should do that. And then after you do that, right, if I wanted to, I could, and see if that list is the same. And you'll start to realize that a lot of the shoulds aren't even things you really care about. If I wanted to, I could is more of an opportunity. And yeah, and so if you wanted to, I could share a poem either at the end or right now, but that really resonates with exactly what we've been talking about. And it's kind of like this realization that I had that I wanted to step forth, right? So there's this whisper saying, you have something to share. And I kept finding a block, and I kept blocking myself. And I realized that a lot of the block was no one else but me letting those stories hold me down, right?
Mm-hmm.
And so it was something I shared actually at the event. I shared a clip of it the other day.
Yeah, and I can only imagine, and I do want you to share that. Maybe we can close out with it if that's all right with you.
Perfect.
Okay. Whenever you have like the cleft palate that you have, and whenever that was resolved and you still have a lasting scar from it, and not only just a lasting scar physically, but it feels like it's mentally as well, is one of those things where we're always told to lean into lean in, just own it. And like, for you to be up in front of people and be very like, you're out there, and like, that's got to be powerful. And I'm sure that people have come up to you who have cleft palate as well, and like have said, dude, thank you so much for doing this and being up there. I have to imagine, and I'm assuming that has happened.
People have done it, but not in the poetry, because I don't think it's happened yet where I've been on stage. It's relatively new that I'm sharing on stage.
Okay.
But I will say one thing in that real quick is that's interesting of my story is I had like 10 surgeries before I was 10. So it was non-stop for a while. And in middle school, I kind of found my stride. Like, oh, it was like, girls are giving me attention. And I was super resistant. Like, I didn't believe it. And because I was the kid with a scar on my face. That's literally, like, it didn't matter what someone said to my face. It just I didn't connect with it. Right. And so, but by the time like 8th and 9th grade came around, I felt pretty confident. Like, it was still lingering lots of other things, still all the stuff we just discussed. And I started like being like, oh, and getting some confidence. Then in 10th grade, I was on the basketball team. In 10th grade, they had to take a bone out of my hip and put it in my mouth. And it was because as you grow, they kind of have to keep doing that. And my lip had so much surgery done that the scar tissue didn't go down. And so it was like, it looked like someone punched me in my face from 10th to 11th grade. And it was like a whole new trauma, because now I'm at a school where people, like, it was like the center of jokes. And like, that's why the comedy had to come, because I was able to outwit someone and then they wouldn't really make fun of me. But it was because I would be able to be better than them at it. But I guess I share that because it was a double journey. Like, it was like, I kind of got over it and I almost didn't think about it anymore until 10th grade. And then it was like 10th, 11th grade. It was like, it looked like someone made fun of me and said it was like a punching bag, that's how bad it was.
Well, you want to talk about resiliency, you just the ability, and that's something like, so at the Stars podcast, we're all about growth mindset, and having trauma is just part of life. Like, we have trauma. Everybody's got a story. Everybody has their own bags. And whatever your bags are, they could be to you minimal. However, to you, they're your bags. So like, whatever they are, we all feel that anger, that resentment, that happiness, all of it. And part of the kind of getting to where we're at in our lives today is resiliency. Like we're all survivors of something. And that's where I think that the ability to survive and to thrive is one that takes practice. And what I'm hearing from you is you sort of got through it by being good at sports, so being like strong and very active, and then it went to verbal, so then you're like outwitting, so it went to smarts, and then now you've combined the two, and now you're up in front of people being verbal and being physical and like being a presence now. So like the evolution of your resiliency is really fun for me to just hear in this
Yes.
story.
Thank you for that reflection. I hadn't put all that together, so I'm receiving that 100%. And it makes me think about, I made a post the other day that said, your brilliance comes from your resilience.
Oh, dude, I didn't even know you posted that. That's so good.
Yeah.
I love
And
it.
my last name is Brill, so that's
Yeah,
short for brilliance, I think. But yeah,
there it
so
is.
your resilience, your brilliance comes from your resilience. So the light that you emit, it comes from everything that you've gone through. And
Hmm.
so I agree with you. And I always say too, like my scar on my lip is no different than the kid that felt overweight or the kid that was really short. It's really the same thing. Mine
Yes.
just happened to be a scar right in the middle of my face that I didn't know how to get by, but everyone has their thing. My
Hmm.
friend, when I told the story the first time, his was that he had a burn on his arm. And it's like, I didn't even never notice it. I think he's one of the best looking guys I know. And that was his thing. And it's like, everyone has it. And there's no level, there's no right or wrong. We all experience it. And I believe that our brilliance comes from our resilience.
Yeah, I absolutely agree with you. And I do think, and Lisa talks about this all the time, Lisa Marzilli. I don't know if you're familiar with her. We do like a meditation on Wednesday mornings on Twitter Spaces. And she talks about a lot about chakras and auras and our energies. And like I really do feel like, because I know that animals can see in different planes. And I think that what you're talking about, this brilliance, this aura, is something that animals can tell. And that's why, because I always had this, and I'm going to tell a story here about this dog that one of our family members had, and it always knew like when somebody was a jerk. It just like it seemed to know. And this dog would just get so angry at this one guy that would come over for Thanksgiving. And it was just like, it just couldn't get over it. And it turns out like he was a really bad dude. And I was like, oh my God, like this dog knew that. He knew the energy of this person was not good. So like that has set me down a road for a long time. And I think that's why like some people are like Caesar Milan, he's able to like dog whisper. There's these people that have this aura about them that's very calming. And that's how I felt about you whenever I saw you and I got to meet you in person. Is like, and I'm not just blowing smoke. Like I really felt connected and I really felt like I didn't want to leave around you. Like we kind of connected like for most of the weekend somehow. Like we were always around each other, and I don't think that was by accident. And I just really appreciated that.
I feel the same way, bro. Thank you.
Yeah. So also too, something that we talk about here is our like daily routines and some things that keep you engaged in the fight. Because as we all know, life is very long. A lot of people say life is short, but for me, I think life is really, really long. And if you don't get a grip on it on the daily basis, it can eat you up. So I'm curious, like, do you have a morning routine? Do you have an evening routine to wind up and to tear down?
Absolutely. Yeah. So my morning routine is waking up, and the first thing I do is walk to my kitchen and pour a glass of water, and I just pound it. Like that's the first thing I do. And it kind of wakes me up and gets me past the groggy part of the day. And then I meditate, and that takes me, you
What
know,
does meditate look like for you?
yeah, that's a great question, because I think meditation can be different for
Right.
everybody. For me, that means that I have this little cushion my sister got me, like a meditation cushion, and I sit down, and it is different. Sometimes I'm wanting like a guided meditation, and sometimes I'm wanting nothing. And it just kind of go with whatever feels right at the time. And I just sit down for 20 minutes and just breathe.
Just be.
And
Yeah.
yeah, and I do different. I mean, I have so many different types of meditation practices. There's some where I, breathe in love, exhale fear, or breathe in love, exhale love. It all is just whatever my intuition is telling me. If I'm in nature, I breathe in from the trees and I say, thank you, trees, for the oxygen. And I exhale and I go, here, I'm giving back to them. And it reminds me that I'm a part of it, because what I exhale is what the trees need, and what I inhale is what they give me. And it reminds me we're all part of it. I'm getting off track on the meditations, but meditate. And then I have a new practice. Journaling has also just kind of ebbs and flows at this point in my life right now. I start every year with I write out all of my intentions off of 3 words. So I pick 3 words that I want to be my main intentions, and I write a whole journaling session for each one. So like there's already like a basis behind each one. And so right now my journaling practice is writing those 3 words and writing how I'm going to show up for those 3 words. So this year my words are expression, habits, and health. And so every day I write expression, and then I write how I'm going to show up for my expression. And that expression could be poetry, or it could be like expressing through business, or it could be whatever I believe expression is in that moment. Habits, how am I going to show up for my habits? Am I going to time block? Am I going to go to the gym? Whatever it is. And then my health. And so that's been a really great one. That's really easy. And I like it because I was very clear on my intentions for the year. And so, expression was one of them. And you got to experience some of that at, Miami. And so like, that's me literally moving forward with my intentions, and it keeps them right on the top, because sometimes you forget. And so that's my morning routine. I do that, and it could take me an hour to an hour and a half, depending on how much time I give myself. And then I kind of start my day.
Yeah, that's something that I've noticed a lot whenever I ask this question. Is a lot of the answers are very much taking time just for yourself. It's like whenever you wake up, it's just quiet for a little bit, whether that's 15 minutes, an hour, whatever it is, that quietness to start your day, and not like, oh, I woke up late, now I got to rush around. Like whenever you feel that, like you feel that all day. So if you can ease into the day, I definitely highly recommend it. And water is like the number one answer, for real. I started using this product, Drip Drop and Liquid IV.
Okay.
And I use them all the time. And it's more or less because I need more than just water, just from all the exercise and things that I'm doing in the training.
Right.
And I have found that if I start my day with those, it is absolutely a better day than if I try and just power through with coffee and keep going. Are you a coffee guy? I saw that you had tea there.
Yeah, I have tea. What's funny is I went through corporate America building a business that was insane for so many years. Never drank coffee once for my 7.5 years in corporate America and 5 years building that company. And then I was living on a 30-acre permaculture farm in Costa Rica after at some point for 3 months. And it was hard to say no to the homegrown, beautiful Costa Rican coffee. And then I started to drink it pretty often. And I start to pay attention to these things. And so I started to realize that I wake up and I'm like, I need coffee. And so I'm in this balance of being like, not saying yes all the time and saying, because when I feel that like I need it, then I have to, take a step back.
Yep.
So I drink coffee probably like 3 days a week.
Okay.
And then tea. I just like something warm. When I start to sit with it, it's like if I have like a turmeric latte, or like, which I can make on my own, or like even a matcha green tea. I just like, this is just like a throat coat thing. But
yeah.
I just like something hot.
Yeah, I understand that. I totally get that. Are you into nutrition too then? I mean, because of turmeric, I mean, that's anti-inflammatory. Are you big into that world?
I would say more than normal people. My fiance is really big into it, and she's like a maven when it comes to anything. Like you hand her something, you're like, "Is this okay?" And she'll read the ingredients, and she like just knows. And of course, this is still the same thing. You could go on Google and find good and bad for everything. It still goes with your intuition. So I luckily have her, and so I eat. I would say I eat pretty healthy, but I'm not the kind of person that like measured out grams and things like that. I have been in the past. Like there was a time where I was kind of like jacked. I'm not that way anymore.
Yeah.
Where I like did a thing where I ate exactly a certain amount. So I would say health is I am into health a lot more than most. But I wouldn't consider myself any kind of expert.
Right. Well, and the reason why I asked is because you set out the intention this year of expression, habits, and health. I was just curious, like what, breaking those down just a hair, it's like what
Yes.
is health for you?
Yeah. So health for me is multiple prongs. It is one is I know that if I want to connect more deeply with my intuition and I want to feel the best and I want to express the best and create the best, I need to be healthy. And for me, that means my morning practice. That means eating, raw foods and vegetables and proteins that are healthy for me and saying no to things that aren't in line. And I've been reading a book by James Clear called Atomic Habits, which I highly recommend. I'm still
Oh,
in
I
the
just
midst of
downloaded
it,
that.
still in the midst of it. And, what he says is it's not just, it's deciding, it's moving backwards from an idea. So like, it's not about making the habit, it's actually changing the identity. So what does a healthy person do? And then working back from I'm a healthy person, and a healthy person does this. And so that's what I have been working on. And so that's why health is, I wanted it to be like I keep looking up here because I put my words everywhere. It's on my journal. I journal about it because it keeps it front of mind. And
Yes.
sometimes you just literally just forget. You just like you forget for a moment and say yes to the pizza, and then you wake up and have a breakfast burrito. And I am guilty of that stuff too. Um, for the most part, I feel like I eat really well. Um, so I guess for me, it is the mindfulness. It is my morning routines. It is my journaling. It is also moving my body. I have for 4 years, I really focused on like the yin, like the like the meditation, the journaling, the qigong, and I now that I'm home, I've been going to the gym a lot because I used to go and I wanted like I felt like I needed to push some weights around because it's been 4 years. So like to me, that means right now hitting the gym like 5 days a week, and it also means that because it's my intention, I I'm traveling a lot over the next month. So I'm doing a 30-day challenge, um, which James Clear says don't challenges aren't actually that helpful. And it's a way for me to commit while I'm traveling to do 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, and 100 squats every single day, whether I'm waking up at an Airbnb in Miami or we're at a camping event next week in California. Like I am committed to 100 push-ups, 100 sit-ups, 100 squats, no matter what.
Mm.
And so I'm like 10 days into that because I
You're
didn't
about to get
want
jacked
to.
again.
Yeah, I'm feeling it. So I was looking in the mirror. I was like, oh,
Yeah,
okay.
I'm getting chest again. I love it.
Yep. Yep.
You know what? That identity piece that you're talking about too is one that I think. So when you remember, like when this was maybe like 4 years ago, 3 years ago, when Dr. Seuss was like bad because it was like
Yes.
some of the stuff inside of Dr. Seuss was, a little bit whatever. Um,
Yes.
and people were really mad. And it's like, and I sit there and I think about this and I said, why are people mad about this? And I really think that it's because they grew up thinking that this thing was good, and now somebody's telling them that it's wrong, and that means you have to reflect and understand that maybe it is wrong or maybe it's not, but like it's your identity that's being attacked. And that's the part that whenever you are making a change, like if you're a smoker, I'm a smoker. Thinking that I'm not a smoker is very difficult. And that identity shift, and like you're talking about, and making that an intention to say, I'm not a smoker anymore. You know,
Exactly.
I'm not a drinker anymore. I'm not this. I am this. It's one of these like little thesis that I am, I can, I will. It's something like I'm
Mm,
working through right now. And I'm really interested to see kind of my ending on that whenever I put the punctuation point on it, because I think identity and changing that identity is something that people really, really struggle with, because it's difficult to come out of certain identities. And that's why I think like curious people like yourself and me and like all the people that are surrounding us right now in this like Web3 space, they're very curious. So their identities like are able to be malleable. And that's why I think it's difficult for other people to like catch on to certain ideas.
yes.
But yeah, so whenever you're talking about health and like I am this now, I love that. Really love that.
Absolutely. And I think that is the biggest, like, people, and when you're talking about it, it's with everything, not
Mm-hmm.
just the Dr. Seuss, but also understand that. And people get caught up in their identity, like I am left, and or I am right, or I am right, or I am wrong, whatever
Yeah.
it is. I feel like I used to care so much, and that's when you can look back and say I used to care so much about being right. You know, if someone said I was wrong, I would make sure that they never questioned, and my credibility meant a lot to me. And again, cry for help. I would then make sure that they didn't do it again. Um, so what was that? It was a cry for help. So why, being curious, why did I care so much about being right? Well, because I was protecting myself. And so as I started to let go of the need to be right, that's when I started to be more open to new ideas. So I take in another Dr. Wayne Dyer quote. You'll hear me quote him all the time. But one of his first secret to success and inner peace is have a mind that it's open to everything and attached to nothing. And so I live, that is like one of my deepest. I am always open to hearing ideas. And that also allows me to take in both sides without pushing other things away and resenting the way people share. And it lets me be curious about when someone shares. And then I could be at home and I could be curious with myself on how I actually feel about it. It doesn't mean being open to everything means I have to agree with all of it. It just means I have to be open. I'm open to hearing what happens. And I realized through that process that everyone is just doing the best they can with everything that they've been taught.
Money.
And so
That's
that's
it.
that's where I go when I think about curiosity. And Walt Whitman says, be curious, not judgmental. And so if that's another one that just really hits me too, like be curious, not judgmental, not just with others, but with yourself.
Mm.
And if you can continue to just be curious, it leaves so much more room for magic and love and everything in life.
Well, it gives you so much perspective too, because you're literally just listening and taking in that person and their feedback on whatever it is. And like it's through a lens of clarity. Like it's through like just the cleanest water possible, and it's coming through. And there's no judgment, there's no nothing. It's all, dude, I know that you're coming from a place of you just trying to do the best you can. And this is how you see the world. And I'm not here to change your mind. I'm just here to listen and understand it. And maybe I don't understand it right now, and maybe I'll understand it in 5 years when something happens to me. I'm like, ah, shit, Jimmy, I remember he told me that thing, and now I get it. Now I understand, because now I have a kid,
Mm-hmm.
or now I went through this car accident, or I lost my family. Like you'll get it and you'll understand it. And something else Brene Brown said was, you can't actually walk in somebody else's shoes without giving them pain. Like, because you literally can't walk through their shoes. You can empathize, but you'll never walk in their shoes. Like, you just can't. And if you try, you just cause pain. And it's interesting to like think that. I'm like, so I'm still toiling around with that. um
Yeah. Charles Eisenstein, who's one of my favorite thinkers and writers, he is just has a beautiful way of expressing things that are happening that are really tough subjects to write about. And one of the things I heard him talk about recently is like, if I would think if I think that I would do something differently than Ron, in the totality of everything that's ever happened to you, the second that I believe that I would do something different puts me straight into judgment, because I don't know what you've been through. And so
Word.
how could I know in the totality of Ron's experience that I would make a different decision than Ron? Maybe I would make the same one. I don't know.
I love that. Hey, we're coming up on top of the hour. To close out, I wanted to get that the spoken word that you wanted to talk about earlier. And
Yeah.
if we could close out with that, and anything that you'd like to get across to the listeners.
I think the one thing that I would say, and I'll just do another, I'm going to do 3 Dr. Wayne Dyer quotes, is don't die with your music still in you. And so follow that whisper, whatever it is, as small as it could be. If you just have this feeling you want to learn Spanish, go sign up for something. You don't know where that's going to lead you. And it starts a path of listening. And the more that you listen to that whisper, the louder and more confident it gets. And so I think that's the last thing that I would say on that. And yeah, and then through this poem, you know, this is a poem that came through for me in a time where I really needed to hear it. And so hopefully it's my intention in sharing this that, you know, you'll receive some of the same medicine that I received when it came through to me. And this poem is called Stories. So I'll invite everyone to take just one breath in. Don't let them take your joy. Don't let them dim your light. They'll tell you you're not good enough, and they'll convince you that they're right. They'll tell you that your place is in the middle of the line. They'll really stop at nothing just to steal your shine. They'll make you feel little. They'll feed you fear too. But one day you'll see these limitations aren't for you. These limitations they prescribe, it's their own that they're projecting. They may think that they are helping you, but it's their ego they're protecting. So release all these beliefs, the ones that they instilled, the stories they accepted, their dreams that weren't fulfilled. Listen to your heart. It's been put to the test. Listen to that voice inside, the one that knows you best, the voice that has a vision, the voice that sees the plan, the voice that knows your power, the voice that says you can. So step into that light of yours, shine bright for all to see, a light so bright we can't deny, the light you're meant to be. Deep down, you know there's more than this. You have a song to sing. You are the creator of your story. You can do anything. And don't worry about those people, the ones that fed you fear. All they truly need is love. And your song, they need to hear. So let's rewrite your story. Go get up on that stage. Forget the past, forget the future. This is your first page.
Beautiful, Garrett. Thank you so much, man. I love you so much. I appreciate everything that you're about. Guys, I hope you enjoyed this, and please go over, check out his Instagram, 𝘊𝘰𝘯𝘯𝘕. I'm telling you, you will not be disappointed in the content that's over there. Again, this won't be the last time. I know it. And I definitely am very much looking forward to seeing you over at VCon and everything that you have going on. So Garrett, I wish you all the best today. Enjoy. And until next time, enjoy the journey.
Until next time, appreciate you, brother.
Absolutely. Take care.
Thank you so much for sticking here until the very, very end. If you wouldn't mind just leaving a comment or subscribing or liking the podcast or wherever you downloaded this, maybe it was from YouTube, I would love for that. Take an extra couple seconds to give us some more love. Even though you have listened here to the very, very end, we appreciate that so much. Could you also go over to thestarspodcast.com if you found any of this really interesting and you wanted to dive in a little bit further? or go to our Discord, which is Rocinante Studios NFT. Enjoy the journey. And be sure to check out our Twitter Spaces Tuesday live crew at 8:30 p.m. Eastern Standard. Free NFTs and PO apps.